Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you, and I want you back so bad.
So today, barrymorphew was arrested. He has been indicted 5 years after Suzanne went missing. Today is Friday, June the 20th of 2025. Suzanne went missing on May the 10th of 2020. On Saturday, May the 9th of 2020, that morning, according to court documents, there were 59 communications exchanged between Suzanne and her friend, who was apparently a boyfriend of hers. Now, it has been a long time coming, but once again, barrymorphew has been arrested, and today I'm going to read the details of that indictment. I have found out that there is some information about Suzanne's clothing. Now, Barry had come out with the story that Suzanne went on her bike and that she was wearing those biking clothes and that she had that biking helmet, which he was searching for after she went missing. But it's come out in this document, in the new indictment, that after they found Suzanne Morphew, when her remains, which were very few remains that were found in that boneyard area, that very arid location, they found Suzanne's partial remains. And they're saying in these indictment documents that there is no evidence of any decomposition on those clothes, the supposed biking clothes of Suzanne's. And so therefore it would appear that she wouldn't have been wearing those clothes when she went missing, but that there's some kind of, I don't know, somebody has either taken the clothes and dressed her afterwards, or that those biking clothes were put together with the partial remains to make it look as if it was Suzanne who ended up there with her remains. It seems there's a possibility that Suzanne had been moved, possibly once, twice. We don't know at this point, and we don't know where the first location is, if there's a secondary location. This part hasn't come out yet, so I'm going to get to all of the details which we have in this new indictment, and we're going to discuss things as they've happened over the years. This is a very good day because it looks like we're finally going to see justice for Suzanne, some form of justice, I guess you might say. Another thing, the anthropologist who covered this case also came out in the report saying that it appears that the remains were not at that final location when decomposition occurred, and they have evidence which indicates that. Also, it seems they've been doing their homework and they have been busy getting the details, getting all the facts over all these, years or months ever since this seems to have fallen apart. But now it appears they have their ducks in a row, and what they're saying is that as far as the BAM, which is the chemical that they found in Suzanne's body on her remains during the autopsy which they conducted, they're saying that toxicology showing the BAM, which is called, it's not easy to pronounce this substance, but it's called butorphanol azaparone medetomidine. So this substance, now this is very interesting because what they're saying is that Barry is the only private citizen which in that area which is known to have had this substance. And so you've got to really wonder, how often is it that you see a case where an autopsy shows this substance in a victim? And I think that's very unusual, and it's pointing directly at Suzanne's husband, Barry Morphew. this looks very bad on Barry because we know that he uses BAM often when he's dealing with wildlife. The indictment states that back in 2020 and the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and GI tract do not absorb it effectively. All right, so that means they're saying the skin does not absorb it effectively, I guess, if the skin is punctured, but that is the way that it would be when you're using those darts, and they're saying the GI tract does not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. For that reason, there are no scientific studies available that address the possible effects the compound would have on humans. Now, this is just some of the information in the indictment, but this alone seems to be a huge piece of evidence that's pointing directly at barrymorphew. Now again, this happened today, June 20th of 2025. Barry is in custody. He was arrested in Arizona after the grand jury in Colorado returned an indictment on Wednesday. He does have bond set at $3 million, cash only, according to court documents. This is quite a large amount, $3 million, but is he going to be able to get that money together is the question, or is he going to have to sit and wait, locked up, while we wait for this trial? Suzanne's remains were found 3 years on Mother's Day. That was May the 10th of 2020. And it was kind of unusual and a bit of a surprise when they stumbled upon Suzanne's remains. In fact, they were looking for another person. That was back in September of 2023, and the remains were found in a shallow grave during an unrelated search near the small town of Moffett, and that is about 40 miles or 65 kilometers south of the Morphew's house. They say that the bones which were recovered were significantly bleached, according to the affidavit. Again, that toxicology test revealed that all 3 of those substances, the wildlife agent, which is called BAM, were in her bones. They said that Barry had obtained and filed several prescriptions for BAM while he was living in Indiana, shortly before Suzanne and Barry moved to Colorado in 2018. Barry Morphew was a deer farmer in Indiana, and allegedly he told investigators that he used BAM to tranquilize deer in Indiana and in Colorado. And this, we know this story. We've seen the photos where you see all of those antlers piled up inside that vehicle, inside of Barry's vehicle. And I believe this was a good way for him. He made quite a bit of money from selling those antlers. But now 2 years later, since Suzanne's remains, those partial remains, were finally found in that area called the Boneyard, like that was in 2023, now we are in 2025. So it must have taken quite a lot of work for these professionals, for the investigators, to get those exact details needed. And we are now going to actually go through the indictment and try and process what they have put together. This is actually not very long. They've been able to compact this down. It's not some insane document which is, hundreds of pages long. This is about 6 or 7 pages. And so here it is. Count 1, murder in the first degree, after deliberation, on or about May 9 to May 10th of 2020, in or triable in the state of Colorado, barrymorphew, unlawfully, feloniously, after deliberation, and with intent to cause the death of a person other than himself, caused the death of Suzanne Morphew, in violation of Section 18-3-102. Now, probable cause for count 1 is as follows. At 5:46 p.m. on May 10th of 2020, Mother's Day Sunday, Suzanne Morphew was reported missing to police by her neighbor. The last known person to see her alive was her husband, Barry Morphew. Investigators responded to the Morphew residence at 19057 Puma Path near Salida, Colorado, to investigate the missing person report. The house was locked, and Suzanne Morphew was not home. Her vehicle was in the garage. Her blank vehicle was in the garage. There were no signs of forced entry, and her bike was missing. Later that evening, her bike was located down a hillside off a dirt road between her house and the Highway 50. The bike was located less than a mile from the Morphew home. On May 14th of 2020, her bike helmet was located 10 meters off the side of Highway 50, approximately 1.52 miles west of the Morphew home and approximately 0.84 miles west of where her bike was located. Barry Morphew was interviewed and told police that he set his alarm and woke up at 4:30 a.m. on May the 10th of 2020. He told police that he left at 5 a.m. on May 10th of 2020 for a pre-planned work trip in Broomfield, Colorado. According to Barry Morphew, Suzanne Morphew was still asleep in bed when he left the house at 5 a.m. on May 10th of 2020. He told police she planned to ride her bike that day. Barry Morphew stated that upon arriving in Broomfield that morning, he checked into a hotel before leaving shortly after for the job site. He told police that he received a call around 5 p.m. on May 10th of 2020 from his neighbors while physically at the Broomfield job site. The neighbors told Barry Morphew that his daughters were concerned because they could not reach Suzanne all day. Barry instructed the neighbors to check the house and specifically to look for her bike. The neighbors reported to Barry that neither Suzanne nor the bike were at the house, and Barry then instructed them to call the sheriff. Police interviewed one of Barry's employees, scheduled to assist him at the Broomfield job. The employee told law enforcement that the employee and Barry were not planning to leave for Broomfield until the evening hours of May 10th of 2020. They were supposed to drive together. Instead, Barry left without telling the employee. Barry called the employee after 11:18 a.m. and informed that employee that he had left without them. When the employee arrived in Broomfield on Sunday evening, the employee noticed that Barry Morphew had failed to bring the proper tools with him for the job, and the necessary materials for the job had not yet arrived at the job site. Review of the cameras at the hotel and nearby businesses revealed that Barry Morphew was in the Broomfield area for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes. Of those hours, he spent less than 1/2 hour at the job site. Instead, beside 2 brief visits to the job site area, electronic evidence and cameras from the businesses showed him driving around to various locations and discarding unknown items in separate trash cans. Hotel footage then showed Barry Morphew arriving back at his hotel and remaining inside the room from approximately 12:34 p.m. to 5:55 p.m., inconsistent with his statement to police. He was in the hotel and not at the job site when he received the call about his wife Suzanne Morphew being unresponsive and missing. In early interviews with barrymorphew, he told law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was the best and that the two had had a wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about their relationship, Barry stated no. Barrymorphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witness accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading to her disappearance. She discussed plans to divorce barrymorphew with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of problems in the relationship recovered from electronic devices and the physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne Morphew had been having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who lived out of the state. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic message to anyone was to this person on May the 9th of 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before barrymorphew returned to the home that day. An overall timeline of the week of Suzanne's disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with her daughter, Blank, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence, leaving on a pre-planned road trip out of state. Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew expected to be alone at the residence starting on May 5th, 2020, until either late in the day on May 10th or into May 11th of 2020. Suzanne Morphew drove Blank to Gunnison, Colorado on May 5th of 2020 to depart with her sister and friend on the planned road trip. After May 5th of 2020, Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew were alone at the house. A forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry Morphew had deleted a text chain with Suzanne Morphew from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May 6 of 2020. The image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." On May 11th of 2020, authorities commenced a search of the Morphew residence that spanned several days. The state of the residence and vehicles showed no sign of a break-in or intruder. Even with no signs of a break-in or intruder, law enforcement collected items of potential evidence and DNA swabs. DNA analysis of the swabs collected produced several DNA profile mixtures consistent with what would be expected in the common areas of a home or a vehicle. The mixture profiles were processed through offender databases and were compared to the profiles of known individuals who may have been present in the vehicles or the residence. The results did not lead to any stranger or intruder suspects. An expert in DNA analysis testified that the law enforcement provided analysts with one of the partial profiles developed from the glove box of Suzanne Morphew's vehicle for further investigation using a key search. This allowed for additional comparisons to profiles in more databases with less stringent quality control standards than the National DNA Index system for the limited purpose of creating possible investigative leads. That expert further testified that there were matches to outside databases nationwide. The term match used by DNA analysts does not mean identical. Rather, A match only means that there were other profiles that could not be excluded at the limited number of LOCI available from the partial profile for comparison. The expert explained that she then compared the matches from those databases to the partial profile from the mixture on the glove box and excluded those out of the state profiles as not originating from the same contributor in all but 3 instances. Finally, the expert explained that just because the profiles from those databases matched at the limited LOCI available for comparison, it did not mean that any of the people from the out-of-state profiles were the same person that contributed the partial profile on the mixture on the glove box. Law enforcement investigated 3 partial matches obtained from these separate out-of-state sources and found no connection to the case. All right, that was a little bit complicated, but they're saying that the experts showed that there was no connection. Let's continue. Law enforcement located a locked gun safe in the garage during the search of the Morphew residence. Inside that gun safe, the law enforcement located a dart rifle or tranquilizer rifle positioned toward the front of the safe. Law enforcement also found packages of Phenodart brand tranquilizer darts in the gun safe, and that's spelled PNEU-DART. The packages of darts included capped hypodermic needles inside of them, which were designed to load the darts. Law enforcement found one of these needle caps in the dryer after the dryer's contents were removed. Law enforcement also found men's shorts among the contents of the dryer that were removed prior to finding the needle cap. The shorts appeared to be consistent with the shorts barrymorphew was seen on video wearing May the 9th of 2020, less than 1 hour before he returned to the Morphew residence. No tranquilizer formula was located during law enforcement's search of the home and vehicles. Police investigated numerous electronic devices and Suzanne Morphew's social media accounts, searching, among other things, for proof of life. That investigation revealed that Suzanne Morphew had not communicated electronically with any living person after 2:11 p.m. on May 9th of 2020. Her last possible activity on any account protected by her password access was at 3:08 p.m., over 24 hours prior to her being reported missing. Records showing her typical use of electronics and social media demonstrated that this was inconsistent with her typical pattern of life in the days leading up to her disappearance. Additionally, witnesses indicated that they attempted to communicate with Suzanne Morphew throughout this time frame, but received no response from her. These witnesses indicated that her lack of response was out of the ordinary. Barrymorphew's electronic devices were also analyzed. A download of the infotainment system on Barrymorphew's truck recovered telematics data showing the location and activity of his truck at certain times on May 9th and 10th of 2020. A download of Barrymorphew's cell phone showed additional location information. Based on data from his cell phone, Barrymorphew returned to the Morphew residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th of 2020. The data did not show his phone or truck leaving the residence again until the morning of May 10th of 2020. The download of Barrymorphew's cell phone registered events related to his phone. An expert forensic analyst determined that some of these events were in fact Barrymorphew's phone being turned off during the time frame of May 9 into May 10th of 2020. Turning off a cellular device effectively disables its ability to record location information. Specifically, the forensic analyst noted that Barrymorphew's phone download showed it was turned off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th of 2020, only a few minutes after he arrived home at the residence where Suzanne Morphew sent her last electronic communication to anyone. At approximately 10:17 p.m. on May 9th of 2020, the phone was turned back on. Barrymorphew's cell phone was again turned off at 4:32 a.m. on May 10th of 2020, prior to him leaving the residence on his trip to Broomfield, Colorado, and was not turned on again until 5:37 a.m. when location information showed him on the road already in the area of Johnson Village, Colorado. Testimony established that the times Barrymorphew turned off his phone corresponded to periods of time significance in the case where location information was consequently unavailable. Similarly, further analysis of the information from Barrymorphew's infotainment system, the telematics in his truck, showed an irregular gap in recorded activities. Specifically, from 3:49 a.m. to approximately 8:10 a.m. on May 10th of 2020, there is no recorded data registering on Barry's information system. An indication of no truck activity from telematics is inconsistent with other facts developed from Barrymorphew's phone, surveillance footage, and Barrymorphew's statements about his activities on May 10th of 2020. Specifically, telematics data showed Barrymorphew arrive at his residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th of 2020. It then registered various other activities throughout the afternoon at the residence until it ceased at 9:52 p.m. on May 9th of 2020. The telematics data showed activities resumed from 3:25 a.m. to 3:49 a.m. on May 10th of 2020 at a GPS location consistent with his driveway. Barrymorphew reported to law enforcement that he was asleep during that time frame from 3:49 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. on May 10th of 2020. The infotainment system, or telematics, did not register any data despite the fact that Barrymorphew's cell phone indicated the device was in Johnson's Village at 5:37 a.m. on that date, and Barry reported being in his truck traveling to Broomfield at that time. When recorded telematics data became available again in the records from the infotainment system, download at 8:10 a.m. on May 10th of 2020, corresponding GPS coordinates showed that Barrymorphew had already arrived in the area of Broomfield, Colorado. This gap in registered data is inconsistent with the pattern of telematics data captured in the days and weeks leading up to this event. Phone records for both Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew were analyzed by expert investigators. The FBI CAST team analyzed phone records for both Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew to determine location information and device usage related to their cell phones. In Suzanne Morphew's phone records, there was no indication of any user-initiated activity after the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 p.m. on May 10th of 2020. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone device continued to connect through RTT data with the cell tower that services the Morphew home throughout the night of May 9th into the early morning of May 10th of 2020. These automated data connections, however, were consistent with the tower reaching out to the phone to determine its location and not initiated by the user of the device. After 4:23 a.m. on May 10th of 2020, Suzanne's phone ceased to connect at all, ever again. Just 8 minutes later, Barrymorphew's cell phone data showed his phone ceased to connect starting at 4:31 a.m., consistent with the cell phone download showing it powered off at 4:32 a.m. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone never registered on any towers other than the tower consistent with the Morphew residence from the time Barrymorphew returned home around 2:43 p.m. on May 9th of 2020 to the time it ceased activity altogether at 4:23 a.m. on May 10th of 2020. Despite searches for the device, Suzanne Morphew's cell phone was never found. Police interviewed people that knew Barrymorphew prior to his move from Indiana to Colorado in 2018. These witnesses told law enforcement that Barrymorphew was a deer farmer in Indiana. Several individuals told law enforcement that Barrymorphew used a specific tranquilizer called BAM, B-A-M, to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barrymorphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence. On September 22nd of 2023, human remains were found in and around a shallow, clandestine grave in Saguache County, Colorado, near Highway 17. The remains found a few hundred feet down a dirt road off Highway 17. This location was less than an hour south of the Morphew residence by main highways. The remains were determined to be those of Suzanne Morphew. The majority of her bones were recovered. Many of the bones were significantly bleached. Along with Suzanne Morphew's bones, law enforcement recovered a cancer report and items of clothing, some of which were consistent with bike clothing Suzanne was known to wear. There was no visible perimortem trauma observed. A board-certified forensic anthropologist, a botanist, and an entomologist all analyzed the remains, and several observations were noted. There was a distinct lack of bug activity, which was inconsistent with the remains having decomposed at that location. The clothing items lacked evidence of decomposition, which was inconsistent with Suzanne Morphew wearing the bike clothes at the time her body decomposed. Additionally, there was a lack of animal predation on the bones. There was only a very small amount of desiccated soft tissue found on a few of the bones, and there was no hair mass located. All of these features would have been expected if this had been the original grave site where decomposition occurred. The forensic anthropologist's opinion that, based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. The El Paso County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. In addition to the standard toxicology testing, the Coroner's Office conducted additional toxicology testing at the request of law enforcement for the presence of a chemical mixture known as BAM, B-A-M, or the combination of butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that comprise BAM were present. Additionally, the metabolite for butorphanol was present. The presence of the butorphanol metabolite eliminated the possibility of postmortem BAM contamination. The metabolite presence also indicated that her death was not immediate following BAM exposure because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the drug before she died. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows, quote, homicide by unspecified means in the setting of butorphanol azaparone, and medetomidine intoxication." End quote. A pharmacologist and medical doctor testified about the toxicology testing done to determine the presence of BAM in Suzanne Morphew's remains, about the chemical compound itself, and about the possible effects of that compound in humans. The expert explained that the toxicology testing done by the coroner's office met scientific standards of reliability and accuracy. He further testified that BAM is a chemical mixture of 3 specific compounds used as a tool for sedating animals for medical treatment or movement. Back in 2020, the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and the GI tract do not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. For that reason, there are no scientific studies available that address the possible effects the compound would have on humans. The pharmacology expert testified that the compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constrictions to the recipient's ability to breathe. Records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to barrymorphew. Records were also obtained for BAM prescriptions for all persons within the counties and adjacent counties to where the Morphews lived and where Suzanne Morphew's remains were located. Those records showed that barrymorphew obtained and filled several prescriptions for BAM while living in Indiana. Barrymorphew's last purchase of BAM by prescription was in March of 2018. Barry obtained multiple kits that each contained multiple doses just a few months before the Morphews moved to Colorado. Records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service were the only entities that received prescriptions of BAM in those counties from 2017 through 2020. Investigators learned that each of these government entities enforced tight regulations to monitor the BAM prescriptions, storage, and use. None of the BAM from these agencies was unaccounted for. Ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, and that is barrymorphew. All offenses against the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Colorado. And this was signed in the state of Colorado the 18th day of June 2025. The bond has been set at $3 million cash only. No leaving state of Colorado, GPS unit, surrender of passport, compliance. Okay, so those are the details of the indictment, and these are some huge revelations here. Specifically, when we get to the very end, we find out that the fact is that barrymorphew was the only private citizen in that entire area of the state who had access to BAM. This is incredible. They have really done their homework, and this is going to be really difficult for Barry when he ends up in court. It's looking really bad for him, and mostly I'm thinking of Suzanne, because these revelations show us how much Suzanne suffered and what a horrible ending, what she had to endure with these monstrous actions from her husband, who we find out that she wanted to end it. She did want to have a divorce. She wanted to handle it in a civil way. And we see that he has supposedly, these are all, allegations. There has been no trial at this point. We are simply reading the indictment, and obviously we're waiting for justice for Suzanne. Now it's been since May 10th of 2020. It's 5 years. It's been a long road, realizing the injustice that was done to Suzanne and the revelations that came in 2023 when her remains were found in that area, which in Moffat, which is called the Boneyard, and that they had been searching for another person and that they came across her remains, luckily. Otherwise, I don't think we would have seen any justice, but it is incredible that they were able to, get that evidence from Suzanne's bone marrow. And that shows the use of this substance, this BAM, and now they're able to show that Barry is the only person in that state who had access to the BAM. So this was a bit of a long read, and hopefully you stuck with me. We will discuss this more. I'm going to go over this again, and this is really good news. I hope that they're able to actually, get the justice, have it, have a trial, and put him behind bars for what he did. I want to thank you all for joining me. Leave me your comments. Let me know. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. We will go over this again. I know some of it was a little bit complicated, but let's discuss it, and then I will answer your questions. I'll let you know if you have any questions. I will have a closer look, and then we can figure out exactly what this all means with all this fine print. All right? Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully there will be justice for Suzanne Morphew.